Hello, can you hear? Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of New Strategy Center Advisory Council, let me introduce myself. I'm Julian Fot. I'm one of the members of the Scientific Advisory Council of New Strategy Center, and it is my great pleasure and my privilege to chair this panel, this afternoon panel. I know that it is the last panel, but on the other hand, the organizers try to make this panel very interesting and very challenging. And the main reason for having a very challenging panel is that we have together with us this afternoon His Excellency Bogdan Aurescu, the Romanian Minister of Foreign Affairs. And that's not all. This is a panel focused not only on Romania. This is a panel where we want to address issues very important like resilience, issues like interdependent resilience, which is another very interesting concept. And for this reason, together in this panel, we have with us also Lasha Darsalia, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from Georgia, if he is connected and it hears us. So, Minister, very glad to say hello to you too. So, as I said, we have a challenging panel, first of all, because it's a high-level panel. We have two ministers for foreign affairs from two very important countries. One, Romania, member of NATO and EU. The other, Georgia, a very close friend of Romania, but also a very close partner to NATO and EU. On the other hand, it is a challenging panel because, as I told you, we want to address the issue of resilience. It is true, in the last 2 days, we talk a lot about resilience. As well as in Romania, we spent a lot of time in the last few months to talk about resilience and to understand what means resilience from a national perspective. On the other hand, in this panel, we want to address the issue of interdependent resilience, and honestly, that's a concept which is not very often discussed, and personally, I'm quite curious to see what the two ministers of foreign affairs will have to say on this very important topic. And we will address the topic of interdependent resilience either from an EU point of view, because as you well know, Romania is an EU member too, but also this issue will be addressed from a Georgian point of view, a country very important for us all in the Black Sea. So I don't want to talk more than it is necessary, especially when we have two ministers in our panel, and it is my pleasure to invite the Romanian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Bogdan Aurescu, to have the floor, and after his presentation, I will invite also our friend from Georgia, Minister Darsalia, to take the floor too. But first of all, Minister Bogdan Aurescu, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Julian. I'm glad that I'm here, and I join the other panelists and participants in congratulating the New Strategy Center for organizing this event together with the university hosting us today. And I would like to commend also a whole range of partners, not least for the courage and great responsibility of gathering actually for a live debate, and I hope we will have a live debate and interaction. And of course, I always know I can count on Julian for stimulating a genuine interaction. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania is a constant supporter of this forum. I have attended the first session in Constanța, and I would like to say that year by year this event has grown in substance, in participation, in relevance, and I've already been briefed by the colleagues who attended as far as the rich substance of the debates you had yesterday and today. I can assure you that the results of these discussions are also very relevant for the work of my ministry in all the stages of the foreign policy decision-making, from anticipation to implementation and assessment of results. This forum has always been about two complicated and complex geographic areas and about their strategic interconnection between them, but also between them and the European and Euro-Atlantic community. This year we do not only speak about complicated areas, but also about complicated times. And indeed they are unprecedented. Today's event should inspire us to reflect upon and learn from the ongoing crisis and all its intricate consequences. Most importantly, it should also lead us to focus more effectively on solutions to not only to defeat the virus and relaunch the economies, but also to become better prepared to answer future crises. And last but not least, to focus more on how to safeguard the core principles of our international relations, of our international peace, stability, economic growth agenda. This, in fact, will be also at the center of our attention next week, in the upcoming days, as I will host the annual meeting of the Romanian diplomacy, starting on Monday. And for the first time, this meeting will take place in a digital format. The reflection and action-oriented lessons to be drawn out of this crisis represent the main theme of this diplomatic event of next week. In my intervention, I would like to focus on three main aspects, according to the title of the session. First, to share with you some thoughts about resilience. Second, to consider some of the ramifications and effects of the crisis that are of interest for us in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And third, to review the essence of what has been done by Romania, by the European Union, by NATO to help the Black Sea region and the Balkans to overcome the current challenges and, of course, to stay on course. About resilience. Resilience, I'm sure that you have discussed a lot about that, is a concept of truly strategic consequences prompted high on our agendas, both in EU and in NATO, already for some years. The pandemic has only increased, and some say increased exponentially, the debate about the concept of resilience, extending it to other areas that well, are of interest now, for instance, to health, but also as far as connectivity is concerned. Resilience of institutions, resilience of medical systems, resilience of the economies, resilience of societies, all these represent a strategic investment. When faced with increasingly unpredictable and conflictual development, states and societies must invest in their own possibilities of withstanding shocks and of fast recovery, be it military, be it political, economic, social, or sanitary. This is also the spirit embodied in our national defense strategy, which was recently approved. The EU has its own strategic approach. Since 2017, our ministry has contributed substantially and consistently to building upon this concept, including by working on its linkages with hybrid, with strategic communication. Resilience is also increasingly discussed within NATO. It is seen within NATO as complementary aspects to deterrence and reassurance measures. As part of a comprehensive strategy for the alliance, and issues such as military support to civilian authorities, the protection of critical infrastructure, of vital resources, fighting disinformation and fake news, but also geostrategic long-term implications are all covered in the process. In parallel, we have already started refining mechanisms and procedures, including by drafting new planning documents regarding the role of NATO in a similar health crisis. Assistance packages to partners encompass more and more activities, and perhaps this is also projecting to help vulnerable societies as far as the concept of resilience applied to NATO partners is concerned. Projecting resilience has become an integral part of projecting stability. In order to strengthen resilience, it is essential for every actor, be they EU member states or allies or partners, to identify their vulnerabilities, to identify their critical needs, to be prepared. And that is where anticipation, prevention, and reaction have to be built coherently. Resilience should be also viewed as a value-anchored notion, which is inseparable from values like democracy, good governance, accountability, functioning institutions serving their citizens, and rule of law. So when we see certain regimes trying to conserve their resilience by fighting their own citizens, as we see, for instance, these days in Belarus, well, this is not the concept of resilience that we are willing to support. It is clear that this is not kind of resilience NATO, EU, or Romania will hold up and champion. Resilience is built at domestic level, and of course it clearly requires a whole of society approach, because it means protecting the society and of course ensuring its safe future, but it also means a lot of effort done at international level. Efficient multilateralism, international cooperation, coordination are equally indispensable in building a true level of resilience. They are an integral part of the efficient answer to the threats and challenges testing our resilience, and of course exchanging good practices, lessons learned, pooling and sharing resources, political, economic and social solidarity. All this means putting together the effort to build a true capacity of resilience. Of course, you are discussing in this panel about the interdependent resilience. And of course, if security is interdependent, if other important assets of our international relations become more and more interdependent, we need resources from each other. Of course, we need resources from partners which are like-minded, mainly. Well, that means that also the resilience is becoming interdependent, and when we speak about interdependent resilience, we should have in mind the resilience of like-minded partners and not the interdependence from or dependence from other partners or actors which are not pursuing the same goals as ours. Hybrid tactics are played near our borders, and then they are tried within our societies. That is why cooperation, first and foremost, EU and NATO cooperation on resilience and hybrid threats is so essential. This is a prime topic also for EU and NATO relations with countries both in the Black Sea region and in the Balkans. Now, on the second volley of my intervention, which touches the consequences of the pandemic on Romania's neighborhood, against the background of accelerating some geopolitical trends, but also against the background of the pandemic prompting new evolutions. There is no doubt that geopolitics is back, and is back on everybody's lips and in everyone's reflections this past month, but experts in these regions will know that it has never left the realities of the Balkans and the Black Sea region. What is more worrisome at present is that some actors, which we very well know, are not shy in acting and speaking clearly in realpolitik terms, breaking both international law principles and also too often basic diplomatic courtesy. It means that there is a sense of impunity in their minds for this increasing aggressiveness, which is a negative trend impacting not only the region but also the global system. That is why we have once more acknowledged and learned during this crisis how important the international rule of law and the international rules-based order is. The values of the West are more essential than ever. They are the backbone of our civilization and must be safeguarded accordingly. And I know Julian is a very strong supporter of this effort. Another aspect that captures our attention is the geopoliticizing of everything, including vaccines, treatments, science and expertise, even the private lives and the beliefs of the citizens. Hostile influences are put into effect to undermine the very basis of the society. Even the means to protect one's life via wearing a mask or taking the virus seriously. The trust in institutions is undermined, and the trust in each other, in the fellow citizens. These are the efforts of undermining the resilience of our societies. The current coronavirus health crisis has made the information environment and the societies more vulnerable when facing the so-called infodemia and skepticism, which is fueled in great part by conspiracy theories. These phenomena add to already heavy militarization in the Black Sea region, the protracted conflicts in the area, the illegal annexation of Crimea, the open conflict in eastern Ukraine, all problems that have not disappeared. In a nutshell, a whole series of old and new negative factors which we can overcome by doing some things. First, being acutely aware of the strategic dynamics of forces in our region and those affecting our region from outside. Second, working together at regional, European and Euro-Atlantic levels to overcome such challenges. And third, preserving and reconsolidating the transatlantic compact, its values and means for our future in freedom and against the tide of unprincipled geopolitics and through the crisis to come. And third, I think one of the important conclusions to be drawn from recent events is that the EU has to pay more attention to the countries in its neighborhood. We sometimes, focusing on our own domestic issues within the EU, we are forgetting about the importance, which is truly strategic, of our neighborhood. We have seen that connectivity is a domain of strategic competition, and solution chosen by one or another neighbor, be they within the EU or outside the EU, impact on our own connectivity and security in a larger sense. We have seen how much freedom of movement and our supply chains rely on what our neighbors do and decide. And I remember quite acutely the times in March this year when I was negotiating over the phone with a lot of my counterparts in the region the creation of green lanes for transport of goods and of our citizens to and from Romania to other destinations, but especially from other destinations to Romania. We have all seen that the infodemic affected also the Eastern Partnership and the Western Balkans states, and we should encourage EU neighboring countries to develop their institutional strategies regarding communication capacities and cooperate with EU on Stratcom as well. We need time to regroup and rethink our course and ways of action, and after a more hesitant and nationally centered first reaction, we succeeded in coming up with a coordinating answer at EU level. At the beginning, the answer was mostly national. It was this temptation to close the borders and to try to manage things in an inner-oriented manner. And then everybody discovered that this is not workable. So we need joint solutions, and we need EU to be efficient. And this is what happened. Such coordinated initiatives included, for instance, the way to manage the civil protection mechanism through instruments like RescEU. I am proud that Romania is the first EU member state to host the first strategic medical stockpile in the Union. RescEU is an essential accomplishment in directing our common resources to the most affected countries in the EU neighborhood, among which Montenegro and the Republic of North Macedonia. As the hosting state, Romania is responsible for procuring the equipment with the support of the European Commission and also to assist its distribution. NATO, at its turn, played a useful role in supporting national efforts, making best use of existing mechanisms and capabilities. Romania was the first to benefit from the strategic airlift capability provided by the Alliance to transport medical materials and equipment. Talking about our neighboring region, our engagement in support of it has been firm, has been well targeted, visible, and it has significantly watered down the initial negative narrative through concrete actions. The EU managed to gather up an unprecedented financial support for the Western Balkans, 3.3 billion euros to help address the immediate health crisis and the resulting humanitarian needs. The support mobilized by the EU to the eastern neighborhood is also substantial, surpassing 1 billion euros for immediate needs and for starting up the social and economic recovery of the region. Romania has strongly supported this comprehensive and timely response to the needs of our eastern partners. I trust the countries in the Eastern Partnership will make best use of the financial packages granted by the EU aimed at addressing this medical crisis and, in the long run, their economic recovery. Access was also granted to candidates and potential candidates to EU initiatives and instruments that are normally open only to EU member states, joint procurement of medical equipment, exempting the Western Balkan states from the EU export authorization scheme for personal protective equipment, supplying of testing material developed by the European Commission's Joint Research Center, or expanding the green lanes to the Western Balkans. All these are concrete examples of support granted by EU to the regions around it. At the political level, even though we were at the height of the COVID pandemic, concrete steps were taken to bring candidate countries who deliver in the EU accession process closer to integration. The Union took the decision to continue the enlargement process and open negotiations with Albania and Republic of North Macedonia, something we were clearly lobbying for the past 2 years, including during our presidency of the European Union. Bilaterally, Romania has extended financial support for combating the pandemic to the Republic of Moldova, Ukraine, and we were preparing more help for Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. Also, essentially, the challenges that the Union and the member states, and this is part of the conclusions I have to draw, have had to face, push the EU to develop a deeper sense of strategic awareness and hopefully confidence, so that it may give in the future a more convincing response to the fundamental questions about the Union's role, purpose, and identity in a changing world. And this has also consequences for the neighbors as well. I would like to conclude by stating that hopefully our response to this crisis and its lessons will keep us prevailing against the spectrum of geopolitics and anti-liberalism rising again across our region and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Aurescu. You already put on the table some interesting issues to be further discussed. But for the moment, let me go to Minister Darsalia. Minister, first of all, on behalf of the New Strategy Center, let me express my gratitude, our gratitude, for accepting our invitation and for taking part in this interesting debate. Minister Aurescu already said that resilience also for like-minded partners is very important, and you represent a country which has very strong EU and NATO credentials and very strong Western aspirations. How do you see from your perspective this issue of interdependent resilience? Thank you. You have the floor, Minister Darsalia.
Thank you, Mr. Frota. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be today with you. So, dear Chair, dear colleagues, Your Excellency Minister Aurescu, I'm honored to be participant of the forum, and I would like to thank organizers, first of all, for such interesting thematic event, which has crucial importance in our days. We are rapidly changing international security environment, stimulates more complex, sophisticated, non-conventional, and asymmetric serious challenges for the international community, including the Black Sea region. Security situation and challenges in the Black Sea region, where a number of major energy transit and transportation routes intersect, is becoming a center of gravity for the multifaceted political and economic interactions. As we all see, geopolitical role of the region has been further enhanced following Russia's re-emergence as an aggressive player willing to step over international legal boundaries to achieve its goals. Unresolved conflicts in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Abkhazia, and Trimali regions of Georgia, and in Transnistria, Moldova, inspired and orchestrated by Kremlin since 90s, and all further Russia steps in the region, including 2008 Georgian-Russian war, annexation of Crimea, and ongoing military conflict in eastern Ukraine, challenges existing international order and undermines whole European security architecture. What is more alarming, not only for the countries of the region but beyond, the occupation of the territories of Georgia and annexation of Crimea dramatically changed political and security balance in the Black Sea region and the eastern boundaries of Europe. High-level militarization of Crimea as well as Georgia's occupied territories, which includes deployment of modern offensive weaponry on the military bases of Russia in the region, serves to project military power in places like Georgia, Ukraine, and even as far away in the Mediterranean Sea. In fact, in Black Sea, military posture of Russian undoubtedly become more aggressive. What is evident if we look at the map, where the Black Sea is now surrounded by Russian military strongholds. For example, there are Georgia's occupied regions of Abkhazia and Trimali region, South Ossetia, where the Russian Federation has been strengthening its illegal military presence, holding two full-fledged military bases with more than 10,000 militaries and offensive multiple launch missile systems in both occupied regions. There is Crimea illegally annexed by the Russian Federation, where Moscow holds 30,000 Russian troops and sophisticated armaments, while Russia maintains its effective control over eastern Ukraine with over 40,000 troops. We should not forget also about Moldova's Transnistria region, where Russia maintains around 2,000 militaries. These army divisions are regularly involved in large-scale military drills and naturally undermine the existing federal security environment of the entire region. Given the coverage of the latest missile systems of Russia deployed in the Black Sea Basin, we see an extremely concerning picture. For all of us, it is clear that by the above-mentioned strong military presence, which is accompanied by the aggressive political steps, Moscow seeks to transform the Black Sea into internal waterways, where Russia can have the kind of freedom of action. This posture reduces perspective of transit prospect, economic cooperation, freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, and increases Russia's access to important regional energy and transport transit corridors in the region. All this perspective has a heavy political outcome and will significantly affect the long-term security and stability of Europe. What is also alarming, it is visible that Russia supplements its conventional tactics in the latest hybrid warfare. In October of last year, Georgia fell victim to large-scale cyber attack. The investigation conducted by the Georgian authorities in cooperation with the UK, United States and other international partners concluded that the cyber attack was planned and carried out by the main division of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, the Intelligence of Russia, so-called GRU. Simultaneously, Russia waged more aggressive permanent disinformation campaign against Richard Lugar Research Laboratory in Georgia, being the main target of Moscow's propaganda. The minister also mentioned using the healthcare issues for the propaganda issues. While the lab has played a critical role to the fight against COVID-19 in Georgia, it has been continuously accused by Russia of developing pathogen agents for military purposes that might provoke dangerous diseases. Georgia is not only target of such actions. Russia uses the very same hybrid warfare tactics against other states in the region, including the propaganda machinery of fake news directed to undermine the system of the Western values. In the same line of the political goals, there is no doubt that Moscow has also a clear interest in preserving the dangerous status quo in the unresolved conflicts in the Black Sea region. We can witness Russia's deliberate policies directed at undermining the peace process and destabilizing the security situation on the ground, creating black holes in terms of human rights violations, which is wider regional implications. It is particularly true in the case of Georgia, which for the last 12 years has remained in a state of war. Russia stays in constant violation of the EU-mediated ceasefire agreement stipulating the removal of Russian troops from the territory of Georgia and allowing international mechanisms to guarantee non-use of force. Despite that, Georgia has been trying to find a way to resolve the Russia-Georgia conflict peacefully through dialogue and negotiations. Tremendous efforts have been spent in the peace talks in an attempt to find durable solutions for addressing the security and human rights challenges of the conflict-affected people. However, 12 years of the Geneva international discussions co-chaired by the EU, UN, and OSCE have been lacking with progress even on purely humanitarian issues, including on the fate of hundreds of thousands of IDPs and refugees, hoping to return to their homes in safety and dignity. Georgia's steadfast stance to peace and security is compliance with the 12 August 2008 ceasefire agreement, and the non-use of force principle has not been reciprocated by Russia up to this point. The reason is simple. The Russian Federation continues to play the role of a sideline observer, showing no willingness to engage in meaningful and result-oriented talks. Even more, Russia deliberately is trying to undermine the negotiation format despite Georgia's constructive approach with Russia. The current deadlock we are facing in the peace process in the Black Sea region cannot be explained from the perspective of local dynamics and through the prism of bilateral relations of Russian and consecutive countries. Without seeing a wider context, targeting the entire Black Sea region and eastern flank of Europe, we risk drawing wrong conclusions. A lack of adequate response of the international community to Russia's aggressive posture in the region has forms serious negative implications for European security. First of all, the experience indicated to the fact that consolidated international diplomatic pressure on Russia does indeed serve as a deterrent factor for Russia and makes a tremendous difference. Our partners in Europe and over the Atlantic, should further strengthen their leadership and take decisive steps to counter the ongoing occupations in the Black Sea region, Georgia and Ukraine, keeping the issue very high on the European security agenda and in their high-level bilateral communications with Russia. Secondly, comprehensive approach and close collaboration between NATO and the EU, which would entail political, military, and economical dimension, is essential. Such a strategy should take into consideration achievements of the countries of the region, their integration path into European and Euro-Atlantic structures, and should envisage military deterrence and more active involvement of Black Sea region countries, including Ukraine and Georgia, in Black Sea security cooperation. It should also entail more active engagement in the unresolved conflict resolution process, active policy to develop regional partnership capacity, and support towards regional and global economic projects. Thirdly, NATO and the EU enlargement process is also very powerful to foster peace and security in Europe. The gray zones will lead to more ambiguity and uncertainty and stimulate Russia for more aggressive steps. On the very contrary, we have witnessed the transformative effect of UN NATO membership on the Black Sea, on the Baltic states, which, like Georgia and Ukraine, used to be a part of the Soviet Union, or on Balkans, which used to be a turbulent region in the 90s. To the end, I believe that the significance of the region in global affairs is likely to rise in the decades to come. The West energy and transport corridors concentrated in the Caspian region open new opportunities for cooperation among energy producers, transit and consumer countries. That is why, in our view, the Black Sea region is meant to be a region of peace and sustainable development where European and Euro-Atlantic institutions have decisive role to play. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be ready to take part in the public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Darsalia. Thank you for your intervention, and I hope that you will stay with us together also for the second part, the part of Q&A. Thank you, sir. Now, we have around 25 minutes for Q&As, for remarks, for how to say, I mean, it's up on you to challenge our two ministers, especially when we are living in such an interesting, moment of world politics, and when you see so many events around us. I think it's quite a privilege to have the chance to address the questions to this very knowledgeable, and experienced gentleman. So I'm open the floor for Q&As, and I see already, Mr. Munteanu from Republic of Moldova asking the floor for a question. So, please, Igor.
Mr. Aurescu. Igor Munteanu, I'm the chairman of the Public Finance Committee of the Parliament of Moldova. Two questions. One is, how can we make better use of the strategical partnership between Romania and Moldova in the time of crisis, and particularly in a time when some of the populist politicians, they try to hijack the political agenda to something that is not related to organic integration of Moldova into the European Union? And the second question is, to what extent Romania intends to send long-term observers to the upcoming elections? We have presidential elections very soon, and the 1st of November. And some of the countries confined to the OCAC stated already that they will not send observers, which means that we are going to contemplate a sort of vulnerability for the upcoming elections. What is the situation and statement of Romania?
Okay. We will take more questions, and then I will invite the minister to address them and to respond. So, any other question to Ms. Aurescu or to Minister Darsalia from the audience? Or is anybody following us on VTC? No? So, In this case, Minister Aurescu, I invite you to address the question.
So we
friend.
very much use the strategic partnership on the European integration of the Republic of Moldova as we have used it by now. I mean, I think it was quite clear during the times of the pandemic how Romania reacted. I was personally on the 30th of April in Republic of Moldova and in Chisinau, joining the medical team that we have sent, a very consistent medical team. And then a week after, the medical equipment worth of 3.5 million euro, reached the Republic of Moldova. And I think it was, a very timely support at that time. But we continue not only, in times of, or irrespective of the times of pandemic, we have continued to support the European integration effort of the Republic of Moldova to the direct benefit of the citizens of the Republic of Moldova by being very strict and asking the authorities in Chisinau to continue to implement the association agreement and the DCFTA, to continue to respect the commitments towards the European Union. And at the level of the EU, I think this, realities are very well understood. And we will continue to do that in our interaction. Last week, one of my colleagues, deputy ministers, met one of the deputy ministers in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European Integration of the Republic of Moldova and discussed all these issues in very concrete terms. Now, on the issue of the observers, we haven't taken yet a decision, but we will take it soon.
Thank you very much. So, any more questions? Minister Aurescu said that he counts on me to make this discussion a challenging, interesting one. So, Minister, if you don't mind, let me do my job and I'll do my best to fulfill your expectations, and I will ask your permission to address the same question to you, but also to Mr. Darsalia. You know, we have seen in the last few weeks Americans scoring 2 important victories in the diplomatic field. The very interesting and important agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And yesterday we have seen that the Serbs and the Kosovars for the first time decided, to talk with each other, and they signed, as far as I read in the international press, an economic agreement. But anyway, it's a very important and interesting step, maybe towards full official recognition. So I would like to ask both ministers, how do you see these very interesting and important evolutions, and if they are causes also for optimism in international relations, because in the last few weeks we had a lot of pessimism, with all these turbulences around us. So do we have also causes for optimism? Thank you.
Well, I think we have, and I will refer to this agreement between Israel and the Emirates, because I was just visiting the Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, but also Ramallah, and I can tell you what are my impressions from the spot. Basically, this agreement, which we have applauded, is a very important step forward towards peace in the region. Because this agreement means not only the normalization of the relationship between Israel and a very important Arab state in the Gulf, but also it means the fact that the annexation of West Bank is postponed. And this agreement will be followed, as far as I was told, by other agreements with other countries in the region. And this will create, if this happens, of course, a chain of agreements which represent, in fact, a set of confidence-building measures for the region as a whole. This chain of agreements, if this will materialize, means that in that region the level of security grows. That means the prospect for a solution to the Middle East peace process as such, meaning the conflict between Palestinians and the Israelis, is benefiting from a more favorable environment. Of course, this is not seen in the same terms in Ramallah. I mean, they see this agreement as a change of position from one of their supporters in the process of negotiating a deal with the Israelis. Things are evolving in the region, and the context is changing, and this means that all actors should adjust their positions in accordance with these evolutions. So, probably the time is not ripe now for the restart of direct negotiations, because, it takes some time to prepare such a step. What is important is for the international community, including for the European Union, and including for all EU member states like Romania, a member state who is trusted by both Israel and Palestine, to support this process of resuming the direct negotiations when the time will be ripe. And I hope that this time will not be too far in the future. In the meantime, what we can do based on the development based on these developments, we can support confidence-building measures, trying to rebuild connections, to rebuild trust between the parties in areas which are not necessarily connected directly to the peace process as such. I think this agreement, which, as far as I understood, will be signed soon at the beginning of the middle of September, this will for sure represent an important positive evolution in this region. As far as the Kosovo developments in Washington, I have to confess that I haven't seen yet the reports, so I will not comment on that for the time being.
Okay. Minister Darsalia, would you like also to address those questions?
Yes, definitely. Well, first of all, I want to answer these questions from the perspective of Georgia. Well, first of all, we welcome, especially the developments in Middle East. We are very eastern part of the Eastern Europe, but we are also close to the Middle East, and the processes which are going there is very important for us. Considering the size and geographical location of Georgia, I could not say that this agreement has the direct impact on Georgia and Georgia's security, but generally, indirectly, it's very important. And as Minister Aurescu mentioned, we see and hope that this is just beginning of the whole process, not the single events in international relations, and beginning of the whole process of solving unresolved issues which we are in our part of the world. And in this regard, we see that less problems will remain, more the civilized world, more the West will be united, and it will have a very positive effect of the security of Georgia as well as the wider region, including the Black Sea region. So that is the perspective from which we see on these developments in our neighborhood and in wider region.
Thank you, sir. So we have friends of New Strategy Center also attending the conference by VTC. And I have a question from our friend Samus in Ukraine. The question is, how do you, and the question is addressed to the both ministers, how do you assess the situation in Belarus and the perspectives? So who wants to respond first? Minister Darsalia, I think it's this time your turn to be the first responder and to address this question. How do you assess the situation in Belarus and the perspectives?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for the question. We are very closely watching the development in Belarus, considering Belarus is part of the Eastern Partnership and our partner through this prism. It is very important for us, the development, and considering my position, what I just can say is that we hope that the issue will be resolved democratically and peacefully in this very important country for us.
Minister Aurescu.
Well, I think the position of Romania is very well known. I've made it clear immediately after the elections, the second day after, and the position was also expressed in various instances within the EU, within the Security Council. Yesterday, I have taken part in this ARIA formula meeting, which was, by the way, co-sponsored by Romania and other countries dedicated to the human rights situation in Belarus, and I think how we see things is quite clear, and it's a topic which very much it's very much connected to the issue of resilience that I have mentioned earlier. Basically, this is not the type of resilience that we want to support. The resilience of the regime in front of democratic change. Basically, we have there a situation where the elections were frauded. We do not recognize the results of these elections. The EU doesn't recognize the results of these elections. We see, force used illegally against protesters. We see people which are illegally detained. We see people which were tortured, people who are missing, people who are frightened, who are oppressed, students arrested, even high school students who are under duress from the police forces. This kind of behavior has to stop. We need to adopt sanctions, and Romania was among the EU member states which from the very beginning supported the adoption of targeted restrictive measures against those who are responsible for both the election fraud and for the repression. We need to continue pressuring the regime in order for the regime to accept the OSCE mission, which was offered already by the chairmanship in office, Albania, together with the incoming chairmanship in office, Sweden, to go to Minsk and try to mediate a solution between the regime and the representatives of the opposition. We need the protesters to be, who are illegally detained, to be released. There are 37 political prisoners still in jail in Belarus since before the crisis, and they need to be freed. All these are expectations from the international community, and I think the support of the international community on or for the civil society in Belarus has to continue on one hand. On the other hand, the pressure of the international community over the Lukashenko regime has to continue. Romania already committed 100,000 euros from the international development funds. I have signed yesterday the minister's order for paying this money to the European Endowment for Democracy. This is money dedicated to the support for the civil society and independent media in Belarus. I think we need to continue with this kind of support. So we hope that the situation will be settled, and a new democratic beginning, which is deserved by the people of Belarus, will happen there.
Thank you very much. One more question from our friends connected by VTC. The question is about the pandemic of COVID, and the question says, do you think that Russia will try to speculate these difficult situations generated by the pandemic of COVID-19, and what countries from the Black Sea can do about it? So the question is for both ministers. So Minister Aurescu, Minister Darsalia, if you want to address the question. Do you think that Russia will speculate the difficult situation created by, please don't give us an easy answer or a short one. Mr. Darsalia, please.
Yes, okay. As I mentioned in my speech, Russia, I can tell you that Russia already speculates with this situation. In our case, we have this very important laboratory in Georgia, which operates last more than 15 years in Georgia with help of the United States, and which had the crucial role in the success story. Actually, Georgia is fighting the COVID-19, and despite of this, Russia there was strong Russian propaganda against this laboratory, accusing us that it is used for the military purposes and so on and so far. And unfortunately, we see this. We see that Russia tries to attack all the success stories around it. At the same time, as it already was mentioned, it tries to manipulate will the successful fighting of COVID, and recently they announced about the vaccine, which was also used as part of the Russian propaganda, legitimizing the current Russian regime as well as its role in the international system. So that's I think that it's already fact that Russia manipulates with fighting disease.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darstalia. Look, before we are a few minutes, because we are a few minutes before the end of the panel, I would like to allow me to kindly ask Mr. Aurescu to say a few words about the important meeting which will take place next week, the annual meeting of Romanian Diplomatic Corps. As you know, September, by law, is the law of Romanian diplomacy. If I'm not mistaken, 4th of September, even the day of Romanian diplomacy. And Minister, I think there is no better person than you to tell us a few things about what will happen next week with this meeting, and what kind of topics or issues will be addressed, what sort of guests you will have. So please, because we have a few more minutes, tell us something about the gathering. Yes.
Very briefly, I will tell you that this is a premiere because it is the first time in the history of our diplomacy that the annual reunion of the Romanian ambassadors will take place fully online. Of course, this is because of the pandemic, but this is also a way to show that the Romanian diplomacy is able to adapt to the changing environment, which is, and the change is prompted by the pandemic. This is the first time we have a reunion online, but it's a very rich substance that we will have on our tables, because the topic of our meeting will be about the impact of the pandemic on international relations and the responses of the Romanian diplomacy. We will have a number of very distinguished guests. We will have 4 foreign ministers attending our meeting. One minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, will be present physically. He will also pay a visit, an official visit to Romania on the 7th and 8th of September, which is very important because we will be able to discuss a lot of issues which are related to the region and to our bilateral relations. And at the same time, we will have 3 more foreign ministers who will join us online. We will have the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan joining us. The choice of the ministers who are invited and who kindly accepted to join us is not, random. It is a choice which shows the importance we pay to certain regions and to certain examples that certain countries can show. And the lessons learned from what they have done during the crisis are important for us. If we take a look at the way the Republic of Korea dealt with the crisis, for instance, or the support the Republic of Korea showed to Romania in allowing us at the very beginning of the pandemic to import essential medical equipment from Korea to Romania. Or if we take a look at Jordan, which is a very important country for the stability and peace in the Middle East, a region which is, as I have already told you, very dynamic, and what happens there impacts all of us. Spain, a very important partner, a strategic partner of Romania as well, like the Republic of Korea, because Korea is the only strategic partner we have by now in Asia. But Spain is also a strategic partner of Romania, and we have a very good interaction with Spain at the level of the European Union. We are like-minded countries, and we also have a very important, a huge Romanian community in Spain, which bridges us, the two countries. Then we will have as guest the High Representative Josep Borrell, who will join us also online. And we will have, of course, with all of them, the opportunity to have a session of questions and answers, which I'm very sure will be very interesting. And then we will be joined by Mircea Joană, the Deputy Secretary General of NATO. So the spectrum of the most important directions of the foreign policy fundamentals of Romania are represented by the guests that we will have, who will have at the annual reunion next week. We will focus on two main aspects, two main volets of the impact of the pandemic on the foreign policy, on the international relations. One is more general. We will try to identify those tendencies at the level of international relations which are either prompted by the pandemic or accelerated by the pandemic, existing, tendencies which were, fueled by the pandemic. We will try to see which are those evolutions which favor our national objectives of foreign policy, and see what are the concrete instruments and mechanisms to make best use of them. At the same time, we will try to identify, to earmark those tendencies which are contrary to the interests of Romania, and we will try to identify means, actions, ways to counter those trends. And then we will discuss about lessons learned from the concrete action of the Romanian diplomacy in the benefit of the Romanian citizens abroad, because a very large part of our activity during this last month, since March until now, was to protect the interests and rights of the Romanian citizens abroad. I have mentioned already the effort to create transit corridors for not only for goods but also for citizens. We have repatriated a lot of Romanian citizens which were stranded in various places all over the world. More than 12,500 Romanian citizens were repatriated through the efforts of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during this period. We will discuss about many other actions that we have undertaken during this period, and the effects, the consequences on the human resources of the ministry, especially at the level of the consular offices and the consular department in the ministry. What can we do in order to improve? What can we do in order to create a more efficient early warning mechanism for crisis? And we are in the process of finalizing a sort of a guide, a sort of a manual for crisis response based on the lessons learned from what we have done. This effort is part of a reflection process that I have initiated a couple of months ago within the ministry. Some of my colleagues who worked on this effort are here. A reflection process on identifying these lessons learned after the after this impact that the pandemic has, well, had upon international relations in general, but especially upon the Romanian diplomacy and the Romanian diplomats and consuls. And I hope this effort will be useful for countering and managing, well, this crisis, because it continues, but also future crises if they occur. The reunion next week, and this is my last sentence, will be an important test point for seeing which are the views of the heads of missions of Romania on these aspects. And we will use the interaction with them, both in open sessions, but mainly in closed sessions, if, well, online means closed in any way. We will try to use their views in order to, well, develop our reflection process and to draw some interesting conclusions. This is in a nutshell what we are going to do in the, well, at the beginning of next week on the 7th, 8th and 9th of September.
Thank you very much. I hope that at least the conclusions will be shared also with the public opinion in Romania, you know, especially when you have such an ambitious agenda to be addressed by you and by your diplomat colleagues, you know, next week. Mr. Darsalia, we are reaching the end of the panel. If you would like to say a few words before ending the panel and before expressing again our gratitude for your participation, please, now is the moment. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Forta, very much. Well, first of all, what I want to say is that when we are talking about the security on the Black Sea, the cooperation of the Black Sea countries is very important. And it's very important for us, cooperation with members of the NATO and the European Union, Romania in this case, and the other Black Sea countries. But at the same time, it's very important for us to work very closely to Ukraine and Moldova as well. I want to say and stress one important issue. When we are dealing with the conflicts in Ukraine, in Moldova, or in Georgia, we sometimes discuss them separately from each other. While when we are talking about one of the key reasons of this conflict, Russian Federation, for Russian Federation, this is one part of the one bigger picture. For them, this is the part of the one bigger strategic game. So in this regard, I want to say that cooperation is very important, and I think there are still more have to be done in this direction. And from our perspective, for the future Black Sea security, it's very important cooperation between NATO and EU and non-NATO and non-EU partners in the Black Sea, as well as cooperation between these countries who are not yet members of these important international organizations. So this is maybe what I really wanted to stress as a final word.
Thank you very much. So, Minister Darsalia, Minister Aurescu, we are reaching the end of this. We are reaching the end of the panel. I would like to thank you very much for attending our conference, for sharing your thoughts with us, for participating. And I really hope to see each of you into the future again when New Strategy Center will organize other important conferences. I wish you a very good evening to both of you. And this is the end of this afternoon session. Again, Your Excellencies, Ministers, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Well-deserved applauses. Now, Mr. Aurescu, thank you very much again. The organizers asked me, because Ambassador Celac, our honorary chairman, is not with us this evening. The organizers asked me to play also the role of the one who is closing, you know, the conference, but not before inviting our good friend, Minister Sorin Câmpeanu, Director of Academy of Agronomic Sciences, to draw some conclusions and officially to close our conference. So Mr. Câmpeanu, please, you have the floor, and the floor is prepared to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, dear friends, I want to thank you everyone and everyone. It was great opportunity for our university to hosting this very special event. I say very special because it's the only one in the Romania in this period, in this very complicated period. It's the only one in the region. It's a very special. In the same time, our university is from 1852. We have a very long history, but in our long history is the first time when we have the opportunity to hosting one security forum. Now we feel more secure, we feel more protected. I want to appreciate the second section dedicated to education. This is one recognition for the importance of education. It's not possible to have security without education. It's not possible to have health without education. It's not possible to have prosperity without education. I want to thank you to the team of New Strategy Center, the team of George, but in the same time, I want to thank you to my team, the team of USAMV București, for the efforts during the last 3 days. Cred că merită aplauzele noastre. Thank you very much. And as conclusion, if it's good this partnership, I can announce the place for the next edition, 2021, the same place, University of Agronomical Science and Veterinary Medicine, Bucharest. Thank you once again. We wait for you next year, but we wait for you to the reception. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Câmpeanu. Thank you very much for everything, for hosting us in such a good conditions, and for the very strong and very open partnership which you have with New Strategy Center. So, we are reaching not only the end of the last panel, but we are reaching the end of the conference. But before, wishing you a very good and pleasant evening, let me say that this conference, it was done in very good conditions, not only due to the partnership which you have with the agronomy, but also because George Scutaru and Anna and Izel and few other guys from New Strategy Center work very hard and work a lot, because for today's conference, you have to work for few good months in advance, not only to prepare everything, especially when you are in a pandemic, but also to arrange all these discussions. When you have participants from Romania, it's easy, but when you have to bring also friends and participants from abroad, we all know that's not quite an easy task. So, although I have no important position in the Council of New Strategy Center, I think as a good friend of George, it is my obligation and my pleasure to express our gratitude to him and to his team, because really, we done the easy job. The hard work job was done by George and by his colleagues, and he deserves also applauses, With your permission, Rector George Scutaru, I declare the conference closed, and I hope to see you all into the foreseeable future. Have a good evening.